back.
Hello, kiddies.
Yes, we're back for another chat. And how are you? How are you today, Ash?
I'm lovely. It's Monday. The weather was absolutely awful. It was horrific. But yeah, it's been quite clement today. So yeah, I'm in a pleasant mood. Yourself? You've just been down south, haven't you?
I've been down south where it has rained as if someone had a boat somewhere with a load of animals on it.
Wow.
It was really, really chucking it down. But it made it great because as I was reading this story, I heard it raining. I thought, I'm going to read this story because the rain was hitting the window that hard. It was like a really proper scary night.
Excellent.
So
the story being, what was the title of it?
We reread this time, but thanks for smashing subscribes and stuff like that. I just want to say thank you to start with. Right, this week we have been reading The Signalman by Charles Dickens. And I know you can't see the names. We put little names on for ourselves. Ash has put Charles Dickhead in there. So Dickheadsian, is it? Dickheadsian Christmas. So we're reading The Signalman by Charles Dickens, and the synopsis is as thus. Basically, a man looks down into a chasm, probably in London, it doesn't really say, where there would be trains going through, which would have been the early parts of the underground. And a signalman is down at the bottom of this horrible, nasty, disgusting ravine. And his job is to make sure that the tunnels are clear, effectively. So he's got a red light, which, remember, wouldn't have been electric back then. It's gas lighting. They would have to go out and light the gas. And he had a flag and a bell so that people would sort of ring through to him with the bell to say there's a train coming so that he could then check to make sure everything's clear. And that was his job, to sit for like 10 hours a day at the bottom of this horrible, damp, dank, disgusting, smoke-filled, remember, it's steam as well, so all coal, soot and everything like that. All there at the bottom of this ravine. This guy just takes a fancy to look down, speak to him, and found his way down to speak to the signalman, where the signalman proceeds to tell him of ghostly apparitions that he sees in the tunnel. But those ghostly apparitions actually proceed. They're like premonitions of tragedies that will befall the line. So there's like a train crash that kills and injures a few. There's a woman who dies on a train after he has seen these events playing out. And what's troubling him is he's just recently seen another event playing out of a man covering his face, shouting out, "Hello, below there," which is exactly what the narrator says when he first meets the signalman, which is why the signalman's a little bit, oh, what's going on? Anyway, so trying to rationalize everything, the narrator then tries to rationalize and says, right, come with me. You're going to come with me and come and see a head doctor. This man who's quite intelligent says, yeah, okay, we'll do that tomorrow. And then when he goes back to see him, the signalman has been killed on the rail track and run over by a train. And as the guy who's telling the story says, I was the driver of the train and I was trying to tell him to get out of the way, he then uses the exact same words and uses the exact same actions as predicted by the signalman who had seen the ghostly apparition. Ooh, and that's where it ends. Ooh. So, now for the big question. That's impressive. You pulled that from up here. What did you think, Ash? What did you think of it?
I found it annoying and frustrating.
Hey, you know, this is considered to be one of the great classic ghost stories of all time.
Sorry, in that case, I should have said I found it bloody annoying and fucking frustrating.
There you go. Thank you. Give it some reverence. Yes?
Yeah. Right. Horror aside, if there is any, we'll sort of put that on the shelf for the moment. But the narrator.
Yes.
Who the fuck is the narrator? What is he doing there? What's his purpose within the story other than to narrate? I mean, he's just like some creepy interfering weirdo who's decided to shout hello to the signalman, who then later on says, well, I'm not much of one for making conversation. Well, why the fuck did you shout hello to the signal man? And we don't get any occupation from him. We don't get any reason for him being there other than to narrate this spooky story. He's just there. It's almost as though, I don't know what the hell he was there for. It just frustrated the crap out of me. I've listened to this story first yesterday. I think I went through it twice and then thought, I'm missing something here because I don't know why that narrator was there. And then on the third listening to it, it was just a case of, well, we're not told why he's there. And it's just so frustrating. That's not how you tell a story. Every character needs to have a purpose.
Now, we've had this before where I've put forward a story,
yeah,
and then we'll start discussing it. And as we discuss it, you usually find a different way of looking at it and appreciating it, and that was going to go on.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen here.
Because I use the same mindset.
Well, I'm not going to completely agree with your points because I hadn't thought of some of those. And now you've pointed them out, I am thinking about some of them. To be brutally honest with you, it's one that I, again, remember, reading from way back yonder when I was about 8 and reading this kind of stuff, I felt the idea of what effectively becomes the Mothman prophecies. That's exactly what this is, isn't it? It's a prophesized spectral, basically. It is completely and utterly pointless. Everything about it. Now, I like stories that take a lot to get into. We've had those. I like stories that seem to be about nothing. I don't mind narrators not having a name. H.G. Wells does a huge amount of those. We don't even always know what they do for a living, but they have a character. The only character I could see in this was that the narrator was Charles Dickens.
Right.
And if I remember rightly, I think Charles Dickens actually was either in a train crash or witnessed one, but I can't remember when it was, but I will have to look into that. But it was just, like you say, there's no reason for him to look over. There's this really kind of strange path to get down to where the signal man was. The description of it being all dank and dirty and disgusting was great. That really was. Yes. I thought that the imagery was fantastic. But when he gets down to this signal man, you never really got what the signal man was doing. I mean, all that stuff that I actually did in the preamble was the best I could get out of it, to be honest with you. You don't really get why he's going down there and starts talking to him. It's incredibly bloody patronizing to him to start with. It's almost like he went down expecting to find an oik and found someone who could actually count. It was that kind of, and I constantly tested him, and he turned out to be reasonably intelligent, So, I thought the whole thing just absolutely reeked of privilege and pointlessness.
It fully did. And that whole mystery of why the narrator, I mean, one of the things that when I'm writing a story, if you've got a narrator's point of view, in that case, one of the most frustrating parts is setting up so that the narrator's got a purpose for being there. Yes. Any narrating character, it's sort of like, it's all right. Well, why are they there? What are they doing there? What are they bringing to this? They are there to meet this particular person and get the ghost story out of them. Oh, right. Well, why are they there? Are they somebody? Are they an employer? Are they? And there just wasn't any of that, and it was just booking the crap out of me.
Yeah, it's like when the narrator does he's talking to him and he goes, "What troubles you?" Right? The guy's sat at the bottom of a ravine between two tunnels, getting covered in coal soot every fucking work day of his working life. And this guy says, "What troubles you? How about your job?" It's a dirty, disgusting, smelly job.
What troubles me is pointless twats like you shouting hello, wandering down here and interrupting me when I was going to sort of like crack one off this afternoon. Yeah.
It was very much like that.
That's not Dickens, that's Dick Outs.
That's Dick Outs, yeah. Charles Dick Outs.
Yes.
Right, look, I mean, bare bones. Okay, it has the prophecy ghost idea. Let's break it down into component parts and see if we can find some gold in it. We've already said that the imagery is very, very good, and Dickens is always very good at imagery. It's like his shtick, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got themes of uncertainty, fear, isolation, madness, trust, respect. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's definitely themes going on there of those. I mean, madness and the idea of isolation and loneliness are definitely there. But actually, they're very forced themes. You never really get the idea that the man is lonely or anything like that. That's completely the narrator's point of view of what he thinks the man should be feeling.
That's one of the unusual things. I mean, we ordinarily rave about Dickens and the way he creates characters who are three-dimensional and larger than life. And the characters in this are not so much larger than life, but forgettable as folk. There's just
yes. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
The narrator has got no personality. The signalman has got a little bit of personality, but you know he's doomed from the start. And
the other thing as well, I mean, is it 3 days he knows him for? He knows him for 2 days, actually, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He goes and sees him twice, right? And then he goes back on the third day, right? And he spends a lot of time with him. I mean, he's like there all night, I think, to the wee small hours. I don't know, giving him head or whatever, right? And when he cut down by the train, when the signalman's cut down by the train, his words were, "No, not the signalman that I know." Doesn't even use his name. Well, you'd recognise him then. Here's a dead body. Yes, that's him.
Yeah, you'd recognise him because conveniently his head is in perfect condition. Yeah, yeah. Head, yeah, looks beautiful. Looks like it did all the time. Yeah, maybe not smiled as much as he used to, but yeah. So here's his head.
But yeah, I mean, even when I've known someone maybe 2 days, right, and they might die, you'd sit there and go, "Oh, Susan's bought it," or something like that. Not the signalman that I know. How impersonal can you possibly get when being upset about the death of another human being?
There's a bit on one of the Carl Pilkington things where he's talking about a neighbour, and he says, it's a neighbour who's died. And he says, "But she was just your bog standard old woman." That's one of the most insulting things you can say. They're absolutely right. That is an incredibly insulting thing. But yeah, the signalman that I know, that's just heartless, really. So isolation as a theme, I get that. He's sort of like working in a very alone, isolated type job. And I suppose that does lend itself to suggestions of insanity, because the more isolated we are, the more we're likely to be victim to our own thoughts.
Well, I think that's one of the things I found disappointing about it, because I do spend a lot of my working life on my own. One, as a writer, because quite often, even when you're in a writing partnership, you're not in the same room most of the time. You're sending things to each other.
Absolutely.
And where I work, as my 9 to 5, because writers don't earn enough money to be able to pay bills. So we've all got to have other jobs. And even then, because I do a lot of design work and what I actually do, you spend a lot of time on your own. So yeah, I thought when it started and you suddenly realized that this is about a man who spends most of his day in a box that's going to have huge amounts of loud noise go past, I thought there was huge scope for exploration within that you do have that idea of your own mind running away with it and overthinking things and stuff like that, and exploring that side of isolation and loneliness and going into the madness. And that's why one of the reasons I was bitterly disappointed, because it was almost like this was a great idea that should have been written by Shirley Jackson with uber realism, because that would have pulled you along nicely. You should have been feeling depressed and isolated with that man for the other one to come in and then have the power of the paranormal on top of it. But it just didn't really hit those buttons. I think the theme was there, but he didn't nail it.
I think we'd got the wrong narrator for it, or the wrong narrative perspective. If we'd got something from the signalman's point of view, in that case, perhaps, because for those people who haven't read it yet, one of the things is that the signalman is seeing spirits or seeing spectres, and these spectres are making bells ring and are appearing, and some of them have made bells ring and appeared whilst the narrator is there, but the narrator wasn't aware of those bells ringing.
Yes.
So we don't know whether this is something that's been seen at the periphery of this man's experience, or whether it's something that is internal and is part of his potential insanity. With the fact that these supernatural incidents occur and he has eventually prophesied his own death, we can assume that they were really happening, but we don't know for sure. And again, those are creepy parts that could have been quite effective, but they were just sort of like mentioned second or third hand and thrown in there.
In passing.
Yeah.
Weren't they? They were really just mentioned in passing in it. I mean, I know we're being on a downer with this particular story, and quite justified, I think. But I'm going to say to everybody, if you haven't read it, read it, because I always recommend to anyone who says to me, as a writer, what should I read? I always say something rubbish and the complete opposite of what you would normally read, because I actually think to write a great short story, you need to know how to not write a great short story. This is how to not write a great short story. And absolutely. I'm stunned. I'm actually stunned at how much reverence this story is held in. It's quite amazing that it's considered to be one of the great Victorian ghost stories. And yet, I'm sorry, but I know you had issues with the Elizabeth Gaskell, the old nurse's story, but that knocks this thing into a cocked hat, I think.
It does, yeah. Absolutely. At least that one. I mean, there's parts of that one that I still remember, sort of like, for want of a better way of phrasing it, the massive organ and, creepy children. Which worked. She managed to pick up on a lot of the horror elements, but Dickens has miscued here. It's fire. Yeah, he's firing a blank with this one.
So let's look at it from again, going back to the creative point of view. So, personally, I think if he had approached this idea from the signalman's point of view, like you were saying before, if you told the exact same story without some bloody privileged pillock coming down to see how the poor live, and it was just him, and you weren't sure whether he was going mad or not, a bit like the Demon Lover when I was talking about the Shirley Jackson thing. If it was told more in that way, that he sees these apparitions and doesn't really know what they are, and then something happens, and then he's trying to decode the latest apparition, so that you could then have the final scene of him seeing the guy telling him to get out of the way. And he realizes only at the last minute that that's actually trying to stop him dying. I think the same story would have been a lot more horrific.
Absolutely. I watched a film a couple of years back, which I can't remember the title of it, but it was really, really effective. It was effective because it was almost as though it was filmed in the third person. The whole concept for Precinct 13, I think it is.
Precinct 13, yeah.
Yeah, where they're closing a police station down and moving everybody out of it. Yes. This was a similar setup, but what they were doing, they'd left this female police officer in charge of this otherwise empty station. And before she was left on her own, somebody was saying, you do know this place is haunted, don't you? That there's all these ghosts here in this building. And once she's left on her own, you see her working away at a desk, and behind her is a ghost. And it's horrifying to watch it. This whole notion that, yeah, I'm seeing her. She's completely oblivious to this thing that's crept up behind her.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm very, very unnerved about it. What Dickens had done with that story is you've got somebody who's perceiving something that may or may not be there, and we're finding out about this perception 2 days later in a second-hand way. We're not getting any of the tension of, did he hear it, didn't he hear it? Yeah, so there was no narrative tension there. There was just description. And what the hell was that film called?
Yeah, because that sounds brilliant. I want to see that. I want to see that film now.
Yeah.
Whilst you're saying that, I was just looking up the Charles Dickens train crash. I think it's a Staplehurst rail crash. His mother on the train. Yeah, it is. This is what I find quite fascinating, actually, because it's called the Staplehurst rail crash, and it was a derailment at Staplehurst in Kent on the 9th of June, 1865. And Charles Dickens was the year before he wrote this, and it was but he was on that train. You know, quite a few people died on that crash. So in a funny sort of way, I find it quite remarkable that it fell so flat when he had,
first-hand experience. Yeah,
and emotions of such things.
The film was called Last Shift.
Last Shift. I'm writing that one down. So that's great.
2014. Yeah. And yeah, it's only got 5.8 on IMDb, but then again, the other night I watched Willy's Wonderland, and that's got 5.2, and I don't know how the hell I got 5.2 because, yeah, that was just...
The scene you described is an absolutely fantastic trope, where it is the idea is that the reader or the audience knows something that the character doesn't.
Yes.
The tension is built at having that pre-knowledge of what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I think that worked so well. And I feel awful that sort of like I'm saying, oh, this B movie was way better than Charles Dickens. But yeah, I'm calling it how I see it. And for effectiveness as a horror story, Last Shift worked because it scared me, whereas this didn't scare me. It just was meh. Yeah,
I totally, and I agree with you as well. There's something really fundamentally, as a writer, as someone who studies the English language, as someone who's, fascinated by the creative process, it feels wrong to call anything written by Charles Dickens as being shit. And that's exactly how I felt with this. It really, really was the way the story was written. And I've been able to do it where you start writing a story and you think you've got it. If I had read back and I had written that, I'd have thrown it to one side because I wouldn't have been happy with what I'd done.
Yeah, that would have gone in the later folder, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'll have a look at that later and do something with it.
Yeah. Or probably not. Yeah.
Well, I would have picked the ideas out of it, the bones out of it. I mean, like I say, if you look at the influence of it in something like the Mothman prophecies, this idea of visions of something that's going to... Because let's face it, it's not even spectral, really, is it? Because he actually sees the real things, not ghosts of the things. So it is foreboding as opposed to being, haunted.
Is the thing that he sees actually dabbing? Is it meant to be going like that at some point?
He saw an actor trying to tell him to get out of the way, or a vampire. He was getting them all mixed up, wasn't he? Because vampires, they do.
Yeah.
I love the way as well the train driver went, I covered my face so that I wouldn't see him get splattered all over the place, but still tried to tell him to get out of the way at the same time.
Yeah, which is probably something they advise against the safety protocols now that I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't shut your eyes.
Yeah. Perhaps try pressing the brake. And rather than waving at him in the dark, use the horn.
They managed to stop, didn't they, to actually get him on the side. Oh, God, now I think about it even more. There's even more that's rubbish. He got cut down by a train that was coming through this very small section. It seems to come out of one tunnel and into another. And it's very, very small section. And so it didn't have enough time to stop, yet it had enough time to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's just frustrating. I agree. Actually, I'm going to go back to your original statement. This story is frustrating because it does actually have elements in it that could have been so good.
Yeah, absolutely. When he's using a red lantern, and you're going with red lantern in a black tunnel, in that case, you're just getting such vivid ideas of sort of like this blood red background and silhouettes on it. And yeah, it's very, very striking imagery. The way he described him ferreling up his flag stuck with me. It was just sort of like absolutely exquisite description and really, really worked. But it's almost as though it's almost as though you've got a Shakespearean sonnet about Hello Kitty. It's just sort of like something that's absolutely exquisite and beautiful in places, but it's about absolute shit.
Can I just say, in defense of Hello Kitty,
yes,
as a designer, Hello Kitty, I'm going to do it the other way, actually. I'm going to say it is like a sonnet about Hello Kitty, as in the design of Hello Kitty is so exquisite, and then it gets put into something as dull as a sonnet. So
yeah,
so
yes, that works as well.
Either way, to be honest.
Yeah, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's sort of like that juxtaposition of two worlds that shouldn't have collided.
No, but they should have, because the thing is that Charles Dickens, I mean, just look at the Christmas Carol, right? And you know he has the capabilities of doing that. But actually, just look at his body of work and look at the way he writes Scary Houses and look at the way that he writes Victorian Streets and everything about it. And you've got to say he's almost, the way that you can say that Stephen King is probably one of the best emotive writers of our generation, because the way that he describes scenes and puts you in the middle of things. Charles Dickens was that, I think, of the Victorian writers. He's descriptive.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Superb. This should have worked. There's that's that. I think that's when I looked at it up on the list. I thought, I do remember reading that and thinking, as a youngster, thinking, well, actually, I don't remember what I thought of it as a youngster, to be honest. But you look at Charles Dickens' ghost story, you look at the basic premise of it, everything about that should have worked. It really should have.
Do we think it worked at the time when it was sort of like originally released?
I got a feeling, because like I say, if you look into what a lot of people say about this story, and like I say, it's considered to be a classic of its genre, I think there's a little bit Emperor's New Clothes goes on with this. Did it work?
I was going to say that, yeah.
I wouldn't know. I think there's a lot of Dickens's reputation has pulled this story through, and I think a lot of people would say it's brilliant because they think you can't say anything bad about Dickens.
Yes, it's like it's like saying something bad about Shakespeare, isn't it? You're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to. I tell you what would be interesting. I'm going to sort of go here. When was Christmas Carol published? I've got my phone up here. Let's have a very quick look at that, because I know that before A Christmas Carol, he was. Oh no, that's 1843. So this is quite a bit after A Christmas Carol.
Yeah. 23 years after it.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe he'd lost his powers by that point. I know before Christmas Carol, his sales weren't really high, and Christmas Carol pretty much saved him at that point. But and I know this was originally published in a magazine, wasn't it? Like a Christmas edition of the magazine. I feel like the modern phrase is he phoned it in. I really get the feeling that the magazine wanted a ghost story from him at Christmas, and he had half an idea, hadn't really developed it, scribbled it down, got paid for it, handed it in.
Just looking now, it's 15 novels by publication date. No, I don't want to subscribe to the Charles Dickens Info newsletter.
You'll start getting Charles Dickens adverts on your Facebook page now.
When you look at his 15 novels, his 15th and final novel was only halfway finished. That was The Mystery of Edwin Drood, 1870, never read it. 1864, Our Mutual Friend was the last completed one. And then we've got Great Expectations in 1860. But all of his good stuff was sort of like 59 with Tale of Two Cities, Little Dorrit in 55, Hard Times 54, Bleak House 52.
Yeah,
I think he'd gone past his sell-by date.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's like he was completely off the back of his name. Some magazine wanted it. I do. And now I think about that, I think it is like a phoned-in one. But I think a lot of people won't call it out for being a rubbish story because it's Charles Dickens, and therefore they'll try and read extra into it. It's almost like the thing, isn't it, where if you don't like it, you don't want to admit it because you think you're going to look stupid if you say that you don't like it.
As you said, Emperor's Clothes. And I think one of the things that we should say in praise of Charles Dickens is he had a beard like a bag lady's minge. And I don't think people sort of like pointing that out often enough.
It doesn't get pointed out often enough.
Looking at an image of him there, and it's all over the place. It's like roadkill. And you're just there thinking, he must have been a great kisser.
But I got in terms of doing the whole classic shit sandwich type thing. I'm not going to be dissing Charles Dickens on this one. Actually, I've read a bit of Dickens, and he is an extremely fantastic writer in what he does. And there are skills in this story, like you were talking about the descriptions of the unfurling of the flag and the actions and even the bell. You know, he does manage to capture a true image of just how dank and disgusting and everything this job is. But I think here the big problem is characters. It just doesn't. There is no development of personality, of character, of reason, of whys and wherefores, and I think that's where it falls flat.
And it, to my mind, it's one story. It's a Dickens story that I've read and not enjoyed. That's not pissing on all of Dickens at all. You mentioned Stephen King before. Absolutely love the majority of stuff that he's written, but I've got Lissy's story somewhere up on the shelf there, and I think I got about 10 pages in it, and then thought, I'm just going to throw this book at something. Probably one of the dogs. It just.
I was Stephen King. I love the majority of his book, and then you get towards the end, doesn't quite do it at the end most of the time, but exquisite writing. So everything about this is we're judging purely on the story that's there. And one of the unusual events as well that we both agree that it's not very good. Yeah.
Well, we're judging it on the story and the fact that he's got a beard like a bag lady's minge.
Yes. It's a phrase I'm going to carry with me for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's it's staring at me now. Looking at me. Hold on a sec. What other themes had I picked in this? So hallucinations, we've got this signalman who's been trying to better himself as well. He's been trying to educate himself, but as you say, the narrator is just so condescending about the achievements that he's made.
Yes.
Which is just, well, fuck off back up there and stop pestering our poor bloody signalman. He's not got long left.
It's a really nice idea that Dickens comes up with, actually, in that you are sat in a very, very lonely, isolated job. Why not try and educate yourself? It's like you are going to be sat here just waiting for the bell to ring so you can wave your flag. Why not try and do it? That's a really nice idea, but again, like I say, the way it comes across is almost like, I was quite surprised to find him being able to, write his own name.
And I think he says he's learnt a language, or at least what he thinks the language would sound like. And it's just, Jesus.
That is like, it's like that ultimate passive aggressive put down, isn't it? I can see what you tried to do. Well done.
It's quite an uncomfortable read from that particular perspective. And as I say, went through it 4 times just trying to figure out what was happening. And I think there are some aspects of horror in there that could have been effective. This whole idea of being able to prophesize your own death is kind of a scary concept, So yes. I've just had a vision of my own passing. That's something that
it's the horror of the Cyclops, isn't it? Because Cyclopses are born knowing exactly where and when they're going to die.
My grandfather actually knew where and when he was going to die. A judge told him.
I was trying to figure out where that one was going to go. It's the myth of the Cyclops. Is the curse that they have is that they are born with the absolute knowledge of when and where it's going to happen, and there's nothing they can do about it.
All right, I did not know that.
The tragedy of the Cyclops, yeah.
Well, that and sort of like the single...
Not the monopolist of it, everything. Yes.
Yeah. That whole notion is, I think, upsetting and kind of scary, which could have worked. I think it's something that when I've seen it in horror stories and it's been done more effectively than this, then yes, it has unsettled me.
Yes. I totally agree. I think it is one of those things that it had all the right elements. There's so much about it that could have been, and that's why it's frustrating. It's not just rubbish. It's like if you get an idea that's right. Remember, everything we're doing this is a lot to do with the ideas. The ideas that underpin it are great. They're fantastic, but the actual story itself is just so wrong in the way that it puts those ideas out. It just doesn't let you really have them, And I'm the guy that defends, the worst of the worst,
Yeah, I can imagine you're going to tell me that Willy's Wonderland is actually got some strong message within there. Isn't being articulated by Nicolas Cage because he's silent throughout. Yeah. Have you watched it?
No, not yet.
Don't.
Not yet. It's on my list. Oh, come on. Is it that bad? I mean, I didn't take your advice about the last season of Dexter, and I'm still going to watch the next one as it comes out because I'm too invested.
Right. Rather than watching Willy's Wonderland, I would seriously suggest watching the Banana Splits movie.
I do need to see that as well. I have seen the trailer for that, and that does look magnificent.
The Banana Splits movie does what Willy's Wonderland tries to do, but it does it so much more effectively.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas, Willy's Wonderland, it's just, if you're watching it, be drunk. or some form of mind altered. Yeah. Some form of substance abuse. Yeah, I would heartily recommend. Yes.
Super. Right. Well, so basically, I think we can conclude on this one that some nice ideas, some quality descriptive writing, some very poor narrative writing. And as a consequence, it doesn't really work. But for some reason, it gets sort of like used almost as canon in ghost story lore, which I think it's just been done on the on the basis that people just don't want to look stupid, saying that they thought this ain't bad.
No, if you're looking at Dickens' ghost stories, in that case, Christmas Carol is without a doubt far, far superior to The Signalman. Yeah,
it's one of the greatest ghost stories ever written, and totally agree. It's worth looking at to see. Don't just take our word for it. Have a look at it and see what you think. But I do believe that is that's where it goes through. So there we go. That's what we had. So Ash.
So Right.
What have we got next week?
Well, I'm not 100% sure what this one's like because I don't recall reading it. But,
okay.
The Open Door by Charlotte Riddell.
Oh, my goodness. You know what?
Go on.
Yeah, I do know that one.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes. Because, you know, like when we did The Door in the Wall.
Yeah.
And I said, I'd like to do a stage adaptation of that.
Yeah.
And I've taken that a little bit of a step further now.
Right.
In that I am doing a stage adaptation of it. And I'm going to include it in a triptych of 3 plays all about doors, and the whole thing is going to be called 3 Doors Down. Right, because I thought that was quite amusing. I'm writing one of them from absolute scratch, and I'm doing an adaptation of The Door in the Wall. And I was looking at the open door and thinking, I wonder if that would fit as well. So I'm really looking forward to the fact that we're going to be reading this, because that can have that in the mind then at that point. So
perfect. Yes.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one to pick.
So yeah, Open Door, Charlotte Riddell, Riddell. Yeah. Which is that the name of the high school in Greece as well?
Riddell High. So I think it is actually. Riddell they call it, don't they? So. But I think it is spelled like that.
Brilliant. So, not so much. Are we giving him a score? Are we giving him an out of 10?
No, we don't do scores. And the reason is because it's not a review. It's not a review. Is that out of 100?
Description, the red and black stuff, and
there's a lot of stuff that underpins it. And let's say one of the major things we're doing when we're talking about this is we are trying to look at ideas, and the whole thing isn't about whether we enjoy it or not. And like I say, there are things that are here that I think have probably influenced things beyond it, beyond its lifespan. But it is more about the ideas than anything else. And you can see the ideas that were there, but I think, like I say, phoned it in a little bit at the end of the day.
Even though it was before telephones, yeah.
Even though, the bell rang and he waved a flag at it. And what did he do? He telegraphed it in. Telegraph back then, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
it's a bit like nowadays. It would be like a text message. We just texting it in like one paragraph at a time or whatever.
Bless him. Yeah. Not my favourite one, but it's worth having a look at just for the way Dickens writes this. And if anybody's got different opinions, then please feel free to share your wrong opinions in the comments below.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As you are hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and then sharing the link to tell friends that we've had a go at Dickens. Because
controversy. Do you think that's a bit of clickbait?
Yeah,
clickbait.
Yeah, as we are there, sort of like saying, he puts the dick in Dickens. I'm
also going to say we have some interesting stuff coming up. It looks like we might have a couple of special guests coming along in the future.
Special in the good way, not in the pejorative sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one is a Harry Potter actor, right? That's looking exciting, and the other one is pretty high up there in creating one of the most iconic British comic book characters of all time. I'll leave it at that for the minute because it's all exciting.
You tempter.
Tempting
little tempter. Yes.
See, that's how you tease. See, Dickens, that's how you tease.
Yeah.
What we're doing is when they come along, we're getting the guests to pick a story the week before. So we're going to read what they want us to read, and then they're going to come along and have the discussion with us.
Really, really looking forward to it, yes.
Should be good fun. So hit those like buttons and get those subscribe buttons up, and that way the guests will definitely want to do it. Okay. Yes. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Ash. That was, again, even though it was a bit of a dissing session, I actually loved it, and I thought we got a lot out of that conversation.
That's right. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody who's listening.
See you now. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.